Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Insights at DDLynn Designs. This is DDLynn, and I'm really excited to share with you how to make these adorable heart rings. So this one I did a little bit different. It's done in garnet, and I did the heart in the opposite direction instead of tucking it under this. So before we get started, please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the bell so that you know when my next tutorials come out. I did a tutorial last week, and I let everybody know that I'm back, and I'll be doing tutorials once a week on all my designs. This is an original design. I actually wasn't inspired by anyone. A little background, I can't draw, so everything I do just comes from me playing with the wire. I just start off doing something and then go with it, and wherever it takes me, that's where I go. So I had made this for Valentine's Day, and I sold several of these, and these are the two that I have left. If you're interested in, actually three, if you're interested in them, certainly reach out to me. This is garnet, and this is beautiful Kingman turquoise, and it has sterling silver inclusions in it. And this is a beautiful moonstone, and I did this one this morning. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut ourselves 10 inches of wire. You can use round or square. I used square on these, and I think I'm going to use round this morning, and specifically for beginners, because I think it might be easier if you're first starting out. Using square wire is a little difficult to manage because it likes to twist. Square wire has a flat side and two edges, so it's four-sided, but it's definitely an interesting wire to work with. It will be your go-to as you advance in this ancient art of wire. So I've cut myself 10 inches of wire. I cut 18 gauge. I'll be using a 26 gauge weaving wire, and I have a 7mm round flat back cabochon. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to be making a size 7 ring, which is why I pulled 10 inches of wire. And the first thing you want to do is you want to wrap your stone. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our wire and we're going to wrap it around the stone. And what's really key is you want to make sure that the wire is a little bit, the circumference of your stone, the wire going around your stone is a little bit smaller than the stone itself, so that we can capture it and it doesn't pop out. We don't want it to pop out. So I have marked my wire in the center, and I really encourage you to do that. And I know that it's 7mm, so I'm actually going to use, let me show you, this is, oh, that's way small. So I'm going to use this is a 6-step bail making plier, if you don't know what it is. So from left to right, smallest to largest, we have 6 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to put my wire dead center on this step because it's based on the size of my stone. I can always make it smaller, and I'm just going to bring them together, and I'm going to cross them all the way over, and I'm going to pull them out. So now I'm going to go ahead and get my stone, and I can see that that's too big. See how my stone is just slipping through there? So I'm going to make it smaller, and I'm going to do that by putting this back in my pliers and bringing these wires together. And it's a lot easier doing it this way than it is trying to pull them around your stone on the board. At least it is for me. So that's still too big. So how I'm going to deal with that is I'm going to push my stone actually kind of to where it's in, it just hit my camera, to where it's in the back. And I'm going to squeeze these wires together. Let me get my pliers. That'll make it easier for me. So I'm just squeezing them together. And it's still a little loose. So I'm going to come in with my smaller step. And this is really what am I trying to think of? I'm just going to pull that in a little bit more. But I need the gap space. I'll tell you why in a minute. Everything in wire art is little adjustments and movements constantly. Okay, so see how my stone can't come out? So now I'm going to actually push that stone through the wire a little bit, just so that it's sitting around the outside edge, but the stone still can't pop out. I don't want it to pop out. I want to be able to have it encasing the stone. So now the stone can't pop out. So we need some gap space, and the reason why we're going to need this gap space is because we're going to cover, sorry for the pause, we're going to cover this part of the wire right here with the weaving wire. So the next thing I'm going to do is, and you don't need a lot, you guys, very, very, very little. I'm going to take my stone out, and this is a really good tip. And by the way, if you're new to my channel, I take a lot of time explaining details, tips, tricks, and techniques, which will, I promise you, accelerate your journey in the ancient art of wire. So I'm going to straighten my wires out, and I'm just going to simply rock this up a little bit, so I have a starting point. Then I'm going to come back, and all you have to do is where your wires are crossing over, bring in your pliers in the middle and simply squeeze. And that's going to straighten them out for you. So now I'm going to just open those up a little bit, and I'm going to put my stone back in, and it still cannot pop out. See, I'm pushing it, can't pop out. I'll show you if I turn it over. It's just sitting there inside of the cradle of the wire frame. Okay, so now we're going to start with our weaving wire. We just make sure this is straight and not tweaked. Now at this point, if you wanted, you could hammer this and make a nice flare on it. I'm not going to do that for the sake of the video, because as you know, my videos are really long if you've been following me. And I'm going to work off the spool. So I'm going to grab myself some excess wire so that it's not binding me up. And I'm going to take this wire, and I'm going to make 3 coils. And I'm just pulling that up. And I'm going to come and bring my wire up and over the bend. So I'm going to manipulate it over that, because I want this wire to cross over like in this ring. Do you see how it's crossing over? And then I bent it up. So here's what we're going to do. Oops, and I got those wires going in the opposite direction, you guys. I need to turn that around. Hold on. So what I did is, if you notice, this is what I originally my coils were on top. I don't want them on top. I want them on the bottom, and I want them above that bend. So, or right at it. And then I'm going to bring the wire across, and I'm going to wrap 3 coils. You don't want to pull super, super tight, because you want a little slack in this wire here. And in this ancient art of wire, it dates back before the Phoenicians, if you're new to wire art. Unbelievable what they did over 5,000 years ago. And I really honor this as an art. I do not give away my work. If you're starting out, it's a different story. When I first started out, I was selling things for $45, not anymore. I think my cheapest item is $85, and that's really the lowest end for me. And the reason why I say that is there's a lot of people that give it away. There's a lot of Asian communities selling on Etsy, which is why I pulled off my Etsy page for pennies. And this is ridiculous. This is an art. It takes thousands of hours of dedication to master it, and we continue to evolve. So please honor this ancient art and honor what it takes for all of us to achieve and master such an incredible gift in this mystical, magical world. So I've done my, I have 4 total wraps over here. So I'm going to do 1 more. So here's what you should have. And now when I pick up my stone, I know that it's encased in this. It can't come out in its frame. And I'm going to slide these up a little bit. Want that wire to be across the top a little bit more. So all I'm doing is sliding them up. Making some tweaks here. I'm going to cut that wire in a little bit. Just want to slide it up the neck a little bit more. There we go. Definitely want that. And then I'm going to be bending this up in kind of like a diamond shape. So now, I really want you to see these so that you're inspired. Oh well, gave it a go, right? So now what we're going to do, because this is going to fold over, I'm going to turn it around because the back side is actually going to be the top of my ring shank. And so there's a reason for that. I want to, because the weaving is always different on the back than it is the front. And so this is the back, which is actually going to be the front of my ring. Okay? Because I'm bending it over so the back ends up coming up. So I'm going to make my back as my weaving front, if that makes any sense. And I'm going to do 4 coils. This is the pattern. And on my 4th coil, when I'm coming up around the back and back to my number 2 wire, I'm going to come over the top of that wire and I'm going to come back in between. Now I'm using 26 gauge, so you kind of got to push it down a lot. And then I'm going to come back around that top wire, all the way around to wire 1, come back in between. So that's my first set of rotations for this pattern. Now if you're a beginner, you want to watch that you don't cross your wire over. So you want to watch for that. Okay. So I am now around the back again. I'm going to come back up over wire 2, in between wire 1 and 2, all the way over wire 1 and 2, under wire 1, in between wire 1 and 2, and I've completed 2 sets or 2 patterns of so 2 sets of this pattern. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and slide that back. You're going to see me do this a lot. I'm going to do this a couple more times so you get the pattern down. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to go around wire 2 and I'm going to come back over. Now I have, and this is important, I have, well, and not really important, but the reason why I do it this way is I now have 2 equal loops on each side. So now I'm going to start my pattern of 4 full rotations around both wires. I don't want these bowing out. And here's another tip. If you're having a hard time, just bow the tip of the top of your wires out, which gives you more room to work in between your wires. So I'm going to do this 4 times. 2, 3, 4. And on the 4th rotation, I'm going to come all the way up around the back. And I'm going to start that set of patterns again. I'm going to come in between wires 1 and 2, all the way over wire 1 and 2, underneath wire 1, in between 1 and 2. That's my first set. I'm going to come back up underneath, over wire 2, in between the 2, all the way over wire 1 and 2, in between wire 1 and 2, and all the way around the back, up and over wire 2, and in between. So we've completed 2 sets of that pattern, and then I'm going to slide it down. Then I'm going to do 4. And if I didn't mention, I'm working off the spool. So now you can see what kind of design pattern we're working with. And y'all can do any pattern that you want. The reason why I chose this one is I want a really sturdy, strong, solid pattern to hold up the ring. Now, round wires like to turn and twist a lot, so just watch that your wires don't start tweaking on you or rolling in an opposite direction. So let's do this one more time, and then I'm going to work off camera. So here's my second set. And if you notice here, there isn't a coil on the top there. And I want that to be equal. So I'm going to come around the top. And now I'm going to start my 4. Actually, before I go off camera, I forgot. We're going to bend this back. Instead of waiting, we're going to do it now. Did I do 5? I did. I did 5. Whoops, a daisy. That's okay. Nobody would notice anyways. Okay. And I'm just going to tie off on this rotation. So now I'm going to put my stone back in. Remember, this is our front. So I'm going to put my stone back in, and I can see that it's not going to pop out. And I'm going to turn it over. And right above where we started our 4 wires, our 4 complete wraps, I'm just going to make sure everything's down nice and tight. I'm going to get myself some tweezer nose, or not tweezer nose, chain nose. And right about here, I'm going to very gently bend this wire up. So this is what you should have. Let me take my stone out. Now I'm going to cut this little guy off. Oops, he doesn't need to be there anymore. He's kind of in my way now. And I'm going to tuck him in. Just want him really snug like a bug in there. There we go. Okay, so let's put our stone back in. And if you get confused, just remember the side with the wire coming over the top is your front, if you haven't bent your wire yet. So now that I can see, I'm going to go ahead and bend this over. And I'm going to get in a good working position. And you find that's really key, you guys, when you're starting out. Keep moving your wires around to get in a good working position. Want to make sure this is straight. And I'm just going to grab this right at the frame, and I'm going to bend it over. So this is what we're looking like. And then with my fingers, I'm just going to squeeze it in. I want to make sure I can get my stone in there. So squeeze it in. Now, let me get my wire closer to me, because again, I'm working off the spool. I'm going to put my ring on. It's a little tight around the knuckle, but that's okay. I squeeze it down because I'm a big thumb ring, index finger, middle finger ring girl. I don't know, I just love thumb rings. So now we're going to go ahead and stick the stone in. And it's going to be a little fiddly at first. And I'm just using my nail. Let me turn this around so you guys can see, because I know my fingers are in the way a lot. They have to be. So I'm going to push this down a little bit more, and I'm going to come from the back right here. Careful how you're squeezing on your wire. I'm making very slow movements so my stone doesn't keep falling out. And now I'm going to hold here with my nail. See how I push that down? I'm going to get some softer pliers. These are a softer plier, meaning they don't have sharp edges. And I'm going to squeeze from the back. So do you see these curves here? I'm going to squeeze on the curve. See how my stone is pushing down? Very, very slowly. That stone isn't going anywhere. You'd think it would, but it won't. Now I'm going to squeeze on that back a little bit more. And this time, can you see that? Very slowly, just tightening it up. Now my stone feels like it's gold. It's just in there like no tomorrow. So now I know I'm making a size 7, so I'm going to weave 2 inches of wire. I'm going to do this pattern one more time, then I'm going to finish 2 inches from here, okay? So we've started the first set of this particular pattern. We're coming up underneath, over the top, in between, all the way around both 2 wires, in between, all the way around the back, over the top, and that completes our 2 sets of this pattern. And then I'm going to do 4 wraps. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, on your 4th wrap, you want to come around the back again. Seems like you're doing 5. And you're going to start your pattern again of going in between, over the top, all the way around both, in between, all the way around the back, over the top, in between, all the way over both of the top, under, in between, and all the way around the back and over the top. So that completes that set. I'm going to do 2 inches and we'll be right back. Okay, so I've done just a little shy of 2 inches of wire, and just saw wire kind of bowed up there. Now you can either flatten these down with your half round, but I want to talk about how much space you'll actually have. If you just start pulling your wires back, you'll actually feel them slide down more. It just makes it tighter and stronger and a more sturdier ring. So you want to make sure everything's straight, and I'm gonna take my ring. That's my 7, so I think that's gonna fit my middle finger. Yep, isn't that the cutest? And I'm going to begin to shape it around the mandrel. So I'm gonna hold this down really tight. So I got my thumb on top of the stone, and I'm gonna use my wires to my advantage. This is like a great anchor. So just gonna push them up against there and then start turning them around the mandrel. And then I'm just gonna see, this gives you a great anchor. And I'm gonna come around, and that's gonna give me an idea of how much more weaving I need to do, because I'm making a 7. So let's show you what we got. So I'm gonna need to weave a little bit more. I want a gap space, as you can see here. It's just the way I designed it. I don't want to weave all the way up. You could weave where these wires are all the way up on each side. You just bring in another piece of wire. That's up to you. Use your own creativity. I did one for a client that wanted that, and so I weaved the wire all the way up, and then I weaved it all the way around the heart, and that was super cute too. So like all the weaving in this one. You see that? Got dog hair on there. That's my dog, Sophie. So I'm going to do a little bit more weaving. And I'm not going to do the 4 wraps. I'm just going to continue with this pattern where I'm going underneath, over 1 in between 2, all the way around the back, over the bottom. I'm just going to continue this pattern for a little bit more. Okay, let's put this back in my mandrel on my 7. Okay, I like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open our wires up Put your finger in there if you want to. Just find what works for you. Got to keep my eye on that 7. And we're going to bring them around. And so I'm going to swing this. I'm doing a little curve here. Just swinging it around. Kind of want it the shape. And the same thing here. And I'll show you here in a minute. Use your fingers. Take your time. Okay, so now, like this ring, I'm just going to weave up a little bit more. And as I mentioned, you can weave up as much as you want. So I'm going to open this up and uncross my wires simply by just pulling them out. And I'm going to continue a little bit more weaving. I need to actually open these up a lot more. They're in my way. See how I'm moving my wires all over to find the best advantage for me to make my life easy versus staying in one stationary position. And this will come with time and trying to just work one way. Let everything work to your advantage. Move those wires around. Give yourself, the space that you need to do what you need to do. So I'm going to stop there, put this back on my mandrel. See how far up I am, and that's good. That's good for me. So I'm going to go ahead and tie off this wire. Now again, like I mentioned, you can weave all the way up. I'm not going to do that now because it's just time consuming. And I'm just going to coil off 3 times. Really make sure those are nice and snug. And I'm going to come around the back and I'm going to cut my wire. And I'm going to move my wire up a little bit. Here's another tip. I want to get up underneath that really close. And I also don't want all this excess wire sticking out. So if you just push your wire up, and I'm working off the spool so my spool is pulling on me. Right here where I kind of created some slack, it gives me an edge so that I can get in there and cut that back away from the core wire, because I'm going to have excess and then I'm going to tuck and roll it. Thought I just got that, but I didn't. So I'm going to push this wire back through again. Give myself a little gap space. There we go. And then I'm just going to roll that tight in there. And this is another tip. If you come around your wire and you roll in the direction where you cut it, you'll really cinch it. And I'm not squeezing super hard. I'm just supporting that wire to really turn it in. And then I'm going to tuck them down. So here's where the gap space comes in. So I'm putting this back on my mandrel. And I'm going to squeeze these around. And I need gap space because if you see here, I'm going to tie these wires off and then I'm going to swing them in to the little heart shape and tuck them under. So I need a little gap space in here to get underneath, and they're going to push down underneath that stone. Because see how much space we have under the stone? So I'm just going to kind of create an X, squeeze these together. And what you're thinking about here is enough space to get both of these wires turned in and under, right? Now this is a size 7, and see our excess wire. Now you know why we use 10 inches. If you're going to make an 8, 9, or 10, if I'm using 10 inches for size 7, then I would use 12 inches for size 8. I'd go up I'd go up 2 inches. You know, I think 12 inches would actually take care of up to a size 10 ring, to be honest. So I think you're good there. So I want to make sure that my wire is snug against that stone. That's extra security for the stone. And I'm looking at my gap space. And so now all I'm going to do is, like I did before, I'm going to move my ring around in my best working position. Okay, so I have it upside down now. And I'm going to come up underneath with my tweezer nose, and I'm going to squeeze them together. And then I'm just going to swing them out. See, I've got just enough gap space, about 3 millimeters, that I'm going to be able to tuck those wires into. So now we're going to do some more weaving. And so what we're going to do is we're going to weave these 2 wires that are sticking out right now together, and we're going to tie them off on the shank of the ring. So let's get ourselves, I'm going to work off the coil. Let's get all this nonsense out of the way so we don't have this as a distraction. Got a little kink in my wire. If that happens to you, always go in the opposite direction of the kink and just straighten it out. That's my girl. She's upset. She wants me to play with her. I'm almost done, sweetie. That's my little Soph. So I'm going to make, coming up underneath, I'm going to make 2 coils, and I'm going to slide this down. Then I'm going to do the same thing, go over the top, but I'm going to do 2 coils. I want to make sure this is relatively close, but still have my gap. And then I'm going to go underneath 1 time. I'm picky, so I don't like the way that's bending there. And now I'm going to cut my wire in the back before I get any further into anything. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get my pliers in a good working position, and I'm going to roll that wire in and really cinch it underneath there. Let me see how many I did here. So I'm going to do 1 more set. Now we've cinched off our wires. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open them up, and I'm going to kind of pull them down, kind of a round shape, because I want them close to the shank. And I'm going to cut myself off the spool about 4 inches. Woo, I am dropping everything. Let's get all this nonsense out of the way. And so I'm coming, notice that I went around this one. I'm coming underneath. I'm going to push this wire through the ring shank. And I'm going to push down here, okay, with my thumb. So, because I want it really close to the ring shank, I'm coming out the other side, and I'm going to wrap around this wire. Then I'm going to come back over, wrap around that wire 2 times, and I'm going to cut it off. Let's see, where am I? I'm going to come out the side here. So again, I'm using everything to my advantage. I pulled that wire away, and if you notice, I've pulled it out. It's got a little kink in it, which is perfect because that's where I want to cut it. And then I'm going to cinch it down. Now, there's so many things you can do with this design. As I mentioned, I just came up with it. It wasn't something I saw someone else do and said, oh, I'm going to try to do that. I don't really watch tutorials much anymore. One of the things I really encourage you as if you're a newbie, really look for technique, like me pulling my wire out that, or hiding my wire. How do I get close enough to trim it? Those kind of things, you know. You get that wire to work for you, right? You're not working for it. So, but in the beginning it feels like you are. I remember. Okay, so isn't that cute? You see where we're going? You could actually stop here and just tuck these underneath the shank and leave it like that. You could weave them all the way down. You could create just little swirls here. The sky's the limit of where you can take off with this. You could put a bead here, a little tiny 2 or 3 millimeter bead. Like I mentioned, you could have weaved the sides. And here's a tip. You want to make sure that when you're pulling your wires around your stone, that they're not down. You want them hugging the side of the stone. That's just extra security so that the stone doesn't pop or slide out. And a lot of people, when I first did this, thought, oh my gosh, can't that slide out? Not when you're done. It can't. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a curve. Now you can either use your pliers or your fingers. It's up to you. And I do one side and then the other side. I never complete a side. Really good tip. Maybe if you're super advanced, people do. But I have found to create symmetry all the time, I do a side a little bit, I do the other side a bit when I am working with symmetry. So now I'm going to bring this heart in even more using my pliers. Notice how tight I'm making that. And same thing over here, coming kind of in the middle of the curve. And I'm just turning my wrist and squeezing it in over the stone. And you can have that heart as big as you want. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut these ends and we're going to tuck it under. You see that gap in there? We're going to tuck it under the stone and push it down towards the weaving wire on the shank. So depending on the size that you want, I'm thinking I want this a little bit smaller. So I'm going to just really tweak that heart in. So I'm simply just squeezing the wire closer and squeezing it closer. I think I wanted just a smaller heart on this one. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut our wire. And more is less, meaning I can come back and take more off. But if I take too much off and I've squeezed my wires down not too tight, I might not be able to tuck them in. So I'm using my ring as a guide. So I'm going to cut these wires right above the frame wire around the stone, like that. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, so here's what you should have. So this is where you're going to want to make sure everything's in alignment, that your wires are evenly cut. And I'm thinking that should be good because it's going to make it smaller. So now what you're going to do is you're going to lift up on your heart. Lift up that wire because you need to get in a really good working position, because we're going to take this tip here and I'm just going to support that and I'm going to bend it down a little bit. Do you see that? So I've bent that tip down a little bit. See how this one's still sticking up straight? And I'm going to bend it down a little bit more, holding my heart, so the top of my heart, and just bend it in a little bit more. So I'm really utilizing the shapes of the wire because I'm presetting myself up to tell that wire where I want it to go. And by bending it down, it's going to make it so much easier for me to tuck it in. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to hold the frame of this wire and I'm going to bend it down. See what we're looking at now? So now what we're going to do, and that was the perfect length. So when you're cutting your heart wire, after you've shaped your heart, cut it right above this lip right here. cut it so that the wire ends past the frame wire and right above it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up on this wire and I'm going to tuck it in. And I'm really pushing it down there against that weaving wire inside the frame. Hold on, guys. I got to let my pup out. Okay, let the little girl Sophie out. So here's what you have. See how this one's still sticking up? And this one's tucked in? And can you see down inside there where I have it pushing against the shank of the ring? So this adds additional support. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to lift up on this wire because I need to get it in a good working position for myself. And I'm rolling that heart down into the shank of the ring, and it's actually tucking up against that stone. Isn't that the cutest little thing? And it's going to be so, so cute once it's oxidized. So there we have it. Here is our little moonstone heart-shaped ring. And it's just so cute, super sturdy. You guys, the reason why we're using 18 gauge is you really want this wire to be hard. You don't want it super soft. If you use 20 gauge, it's likely going to get caught up on something and pull out, which is why we're pushing it down into that weaving wire really, really tight. So if you want, you can always come in and just kind of press down on this heart even more, just a little bit. But it's really, really in there. So I'm going to put this back on my ring shank, and it's a little bit bigger than my 7. That's okay. It looks like I hit a 7.5. You can slightly hammer this if you want with a rubber mallet. So let me show you that. I'm just gently tapping. And it's just going to harden that wire. I'm even going to do it on my frame. And I'm doing very gentle taps. And it's just going to harden that wire even more. Now, if you find it's too small, you can use your mallet to hit down. If I wanted to enlarge this, I likely could bring it up to almost a 9, I'm thinking. There's a lot of room. And it's going to look so cute when it's oxidized. So here we have it. Here are our rings. Aren't they cute? I really hope you enjoyed that, everybody. Please give me your feedback. It really means a lot to me. And again, don't forget to hit the bell. And this is such a magical, wonderful world in the ancient art of wire. And as Thumper said in Bambi, if you ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all. I wish for all of you all that you wish for yourselves. I truly do. And you have a wonderful, magical, mystical day. Bye for now.